Chapter 13. Navy Family from One Post to Another. The family provides the Army and Navy with the best men and boys that it possesses, and, as we have seen, education and science, too, are becoming means to the ends sought by the military. C. Wright Mills, American sociologist, 1916–1962. Upon completion of his commissary school in San Diego, Tony went home to Wilmington, Delaware, to help move his family to his new assignment at Long Beach, California aboard the USS Blue DD-744, homeported in Long Beach, California from March 1970 to January 1971. It was during the summer of 1969 when the family of three, Tony, his wife Priscilla, and 3-year-old Gerard, traveled west, passing through West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Kansas, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, Nevada, and towards California. All of them, especially Gerard, enjoyed the trip. To them, the highways and the beautiful scenery of America were just fantastic vistas for their young son to see. Gerard could not stop talking during the trip, which greatly entertained and captivated his parents. It was also a great relief to leave the East Coast, as they never got used to the cold weather in the entire time they were living there. As a Navy wife, Priscilla had to sacrifice her medical career in order to join her husband, relocating to places where he was assigned. This was quite a sacrifice to make, because her role as a physician was preeminently more prestigious and compelling than that of a sailor. But to her, it was no problem. Her family and her husband's career came ahead of her medical practice. Whenever Tony told her he had a new assignment that necessitated the relocation of his family, she never complained. She was then working as an emergency doctor and medical internist at the Jewish Memorial Hospital. She would just quietly make preparations for the move. It did not matter that in moving to a new state like California, she had to take and pass another board exam to get a new license to practice medicine. She must be highly intelligent, Tony often thought. She had no problem acing those exams. Tony was then on temporary additional duty, TAD, at the USS Isle Royale AD-29, homeported in Long Beach while waiting for his ship, the USS Blue DD-477. The latter ship was later decommissioned. While aboard the Isle Royale, Tony met MSCM Mess Management Master Chief Jim Edgar. The two later became best of friends. Jim Edgar had a 2-star rank, which is the designation for a senior commander in many of the armed services holding a rank described by the NATO code of OF7, according to a Wikipedia definition. He was the overall in charge of operation as food service officer. He must have liked the way I managed things, Tony surmised. I was a brand new guy, and he took me under his wings, like we were family. He taught me a lot about how to become a good leader, how to communicate, how to get along with people, and even play golf. Even when we were both retired, he would visit me once a year. He could not believe what I have done to my life. The last time I saw him was at Camp Pendleton. I even told his daughter Linda to make sure I am informed if anything happened to him. Unfortunately, I was out of the country when he passed away, and I could not pay my last respect. By then, Priscilla was at the University of Irvine, taking a course on her specialty, adult and child psychiatry. The couple bought and moved to their first home in Anaheim, California. It was in May 11, 1970, when his daughter Wendy was born. It was also the same year when Priscilla's mother, Virginia Roque Santos from Orion, Bataan, arrived along with Norma Santos, a nurse graduate and the daughter of her older brother Federico. Their arrival was a blessing to our family, for they served as excellent guardians to both of my children. My mother-in-law stayed with us for over 15 years while Norma had gotten married to Wilkie Ureta, a registered nurse from Aklan, Philippines, Tony said. We truly acknowledge the help and unwavering support of my mother-in-law, for she helped raise my children and taught them the value of respect, intellect, strength, and courage. Her unselfish sharing of her time, talent, skills, and experiences made her a true role model to everyone. She was also partly responsible for what my children had become today. While at Long Beach in 1970, Tony met the commanding officer of the naval station in the area. Lieutenant Commander Larry Duncan, the station's administrative officer, who was also the first Filipino-American officer he had met, and Lieutenant Commander Carl Moon, the limited duty and base supply officer. Tony was selected to become Chief Petty Officer in May 1971 to relieve Master Chief Jim Edgar as officer in charge of the Food Service Division. Tony's position as the officer in charge, assigned as Food Service Officer, later helped him in his career. He gained a lot of friends among the officers who were eating there. One day during the summer months in 1973, some boatswain's mates informed him that there were a lot of paints being given away. They were supposed to be used in the painting of ships, but since many were being decommissioned, excess paints were accumulated. The leading chief of the boat asked, "Would you like to have some paint, Tony?" "Of course," Tony replied. He thought of applying a fresh coat of paint to the building. Not only would it make the building look clean and beautiful, the cans of paint, more importantly, were free. The Navy did not have to spend anything. He requested a Mr. Miller, the shipyard bus driver, to lend him some spray paint guns to use. The two became good friends as the driver used to have his coffee at the mess hall. He also helped deliver the paints to Tony. The paints, which were of different colors, were mixed together by Tony and other volunteers. Unfortunately, after spray painting the buildings, the mixture dried to a shade of pink. And it didn't stop with the buildings. A dozen cars parked near the buildings were also the beneficiaries of the paint job blown by the wind from the sprayer. The car owners filed a complaint with the commanding officer, who was aghast to see the pink-colored building. One is reminded of the movie Operation Petticoat in 1959, where Cary Grant and Tony Curtis found themselves stuck in a decrepit pink submarine. Tony, Pizarro, that is, not his idol Tony Curtis, was told the galley, Navy term for mess hall, was covered by the Naval Facility Manual that required the use of approved colors for government buildings. The commanding officer, executive officer, supply officer, and administrative officer summoned Tony and told him of the complaint charges. Tony told them he didn't know about the paint code and all he wanted was to do a good deed outside of his job description. He pleaded guilty to the charges, although he meant no malice. Later on, he was surprised and puzzled when he was told he was being considered to become a member of the Navy Food Management Team in San Diego for his next duty assignment. He was also informed he was the first of Filipino descent to be admitted for such an assignment. He was then directed to report back to the Service School Command at NTC San Diego, California, to study and become an instructor at commissary school. He told everybody he already attended the same school. Years later, Tony theorized they must have wanted to hide him during the investigation of the pink paint fiasco until he got his official transfer order to the Navy Food Management Team, also in San Diego. But that was just his speculation, not proven by facts. "You're no longer in command, Pizarro," he was told. "I want you to pack your bag and go back to school in San Diego." He now believes if one does a good job, one would be cared for by the Navy. The command also recommended that Tony apply for the Limited Duty Officer program to further boost his career as a commissioned supply officer. Later, Tony was assigned to a shore duty station at the Naval Training Center, NTC, in San Diego, California. It was the biggest boot training camp for newly recruited sailors in the West Coast. Since his family was living in Long Beach, California, he requested a colleague, Commissary Petty Officer First Class, CS-1, William Campbell, who was assigned at the Naval Station Galley in San Diego, to swap places with him. The request was granted since there was no cost to the government. While stationed at the training center, Tony was discriminated against by his leading chief, named Fennell. Fennell gave Tony only a satisfactory performance rating, while all those under him were given outstanding and higher ratings. He was the only Filipino in the group. "I was distraught when I found my performance review and those of my subordinates with high marks in the galley trash can that evening," he recalled. Tony requested, without asking permission, for a private captain mast, a naval term for a private audience between a subordinate and a superior. It is a right to see the commanding officer if one has a valid complaint. "Since my subordinates did well, why would I, their superior, not get credit for their excellent performance?" he argued. "Why would I get a lower grade? It defies logic." His superior was asked by his commanding officer if it was true. The CO agreed that Tony was graded wrongfully, and he directed all department heads to review and reverse the grades accordingly. On his way out, Tony passed by the chief, who discriminated against him. "One day, Chief, you will wind up working for me," he warned him. When those prophetic words eventually came true, the biased chief chose to quit and retire rather than work for him. Right thereafter, his request for swap duty with Ben Campbell from San Diego to Long Beach was approved. Tony checked out of the Naval Training Center and reported to Long Beach. A week later, Tony found out that he was selected for promotion to the rank of Chief Petty Officer. Tony's skill and expertise in his job was demonstrated when thousands of Vietnamese refugees arrived in San Diego. The Navy was required to feed them, but the officers didn't know how. Tony, together with the other U.S. Marines Food Service officers, was invited to a meeting at Camp Pendleton Marine Corps Base in Oceanside, California. The meeting was presided over by the Camp Commandant General Graham. "What should we feed them?" the general asked the group. Tony raised his hands and said, "We Asians only eat meat, pork, poultry, and fish with rice. I strongly recommend a 7-day menu cycle for the purpose of easy accountability and responsibility." The general was impressed with Tony's recommendation. He assigned him to head the project. A few days thereafter, Operation New Life was launched, and Camp Pendleton started receiving refugees arriving from Vietnam and other refugee camps in Guam, Philippines, and Singapore. They were fed breakfast, lunch, and dinner for an output of over 42,000 meals a day without any problem. Years later, when Tony was talking about this incident, his son Gerard realized that his wife Tina, who is now a registered nurse, with her 4 other sisters and their parents, might have been among the refugees fed by Tony in that camp. She was a young girl then, and she remembered staying at Camp Pendleton upon their arrival as refugees from Vietnam and being fed at the mess hall set up for them.